Okay, so I'm going to show you how to bead a rope, this rope, with a wrap stitch. This beaded rope is going to be used for a medallion. This is the completed medallion, and I'm now ready to begin the beaded rope and attach the beaded rope to the medallion. First, what I did was I marked the rope here. These lines tell me just how long the medallion will be. This is where I would sew the beaded rope to the completed medallion. After I've sewed the rope to the medallion, before I sew the rope to the medallion, at this point, I'm going to begin a wrap stitch just above this line on this side of the rope. And so I have the materials, thread, beeswax, scissors, the beads I'm going to use, the medallion itself, and needles, or just one needle. I really just need one needle. And so for the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to cut a piece of thread. I always cut arm's length of thread, and just for the record, this is the type of thread that I'm using. Nemo size D white nylon thread. Okay, so this is the needle that I would like to use. I'm gonna thread the needle with this thread that I just cut. Needle is a size 10 and the thread is a size D. The thread might be a little too thick for the needle, but that's what we have to work with. I'm going to coat the thread with beeswax now. Okay, so I have the needle and thread ready. I haven't tied a knot on the end of the thread. For this, it's not necessary. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, remember this is where I'm gonna sew the rope to the medallion. And so I'm going to place the needle into the rope just like this. Anywhere is good. I'm going to pull the thread all the way through to the end. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie the two ends together. With a square knot, granny knot, whichever. Square knot probably won't slip, but I think a granny knot works fine too. Okay, so the rope and the thread are attached. Okay, now what I'm gonna get ready to do is pull out my beads. and start beading onto the rope. Okay, I'm gonna start with red. Okay. So I tried this out the other day with our language apprentices, and we determined that about 14 beads will go around this particular rope. I like to keep track of how many beads go around the rope, how many beads it takes to make one row. That's 14 beads right there. And by me keeping track of how many beads it takes to make one row, I'm able to keep my design pretty consistent. And it all depends on how tightly you pull the beads, how tightly you pull the rows. So we said about 14. The way that I'm pulling the rope, pulling on the thread right now, it might be about 12. So or even 11. This rope we made by hand with yarn. We didn't have any, already made rope on hand when we started the project, so we went ahead and twisted our own rope using white and black yarn. Okay, so I determined that 11 beads will make one rope. One row. We'll make one row. Okay, and so what I'd like to do is I'd like to add more beads on, so you can get an idea of exactly what happens as you bead along this rope. So now I have 22 beads, and that should be about enough for 2 rows. Keep in mind the way that you hold the rope. You want to hold the rope taut. I like to hold the rope between my pointer finger, middle finger, thumb, and ring finger. And I use my pointer finger and thumb on my other hand to keep the thread taut. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now, my thumb and my pointer finger are holding on to the rope. What I'm gonna do is use my middle finger to hold the thread down, just like that. And with my other hand, I'm gonna stick the needle right next to the last bead. I'm gonna go all the way, stick the needle all the way through the rope, and it comes out the other side of the rope between the last row and the previous row of beads. I'm gonna pull the needle all the way through. All the while, I'm still holding everything taut. Holding everything tight, making sure everything's tight. So I have the thread, I'm holding it right here, and now I've moved my thumb to hold down the beads. And to tighten it, you pull the thread. You can squeeze the rows, you know, to shift around the beads. Okay, and so if I pull the thread, what you want to do, the beads are sort of locked in place, but in order to continue the stitch, what you want to do is pull the thread. Once you pull the thread, you can see exactly where the thread comes out of the rope and which two beads it's between. So my thread is between this bead and this bead. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my needle through the beads of the last row. I'm going to reach all the way around the rope to the bead where I left off. You want to be careful that your thread doesn't get caught up in the tail of the rope. Okay, and so here's the last bead that I added on. And so now the thread is right where I left off, right here. I can continue the wrap stitch. And if you see, if you keep count of your beads, I said for this rope and for the way I'm pulling on the thread, you know, the tightness, how tight I'm pulling on the thread, I determined 11 beads will make one row. If you take a look here, here's the very first bead that I added on, and here's my last bead that I added on. They match up. And I did add on, you know, 22 beads, and that makes, you know, from this perspective, 2 rows, right? 2 rows. So I have 2 rows on this side as well. When you're working with a solid color, keeping count of your beads isn't as important as when you're switching colors. And it's you know, up to you to, you know, how closely you want to pay attention to you know, the count of your beads. But the count of the rows becomes important because the number of rows is what makes up your pattern in the wrap stitch. Okay, so I'm going to continue with red.